are going to bring it back to plants that we know that are around here in New Mexico, and we're going to make it relevant to things that you might be considering in every day. Was there anything else here? So, a little outline, what we're going to be talking about.
We're going to go through our stories, and we're going to ask you guys a little bit about yourselves, so keep your phones out like we said. And then we're going to get into some of what makes plants wacky, weird, and wild, and talk about why do plants matter. A lot of times, you know, we think about oxygen, but there's a lot of things past oxygen that plants do for us. We're going to get into a few different plant stories, think about plants of the future, and then talk about your future and how it relates to plants.
So our stories, Molly.
So I grew up actually in Albuquerque, and I was a garden kid. My nickname as a little girl was the compost queen, because my mom would roll me around in the wheelbarrow, and I was always sitting on top of the pile of compost, and she would find me. I'd break out of the house and be in the garden in the morning. So I've grown up in gardens, and I love sharing the things that I love with others. So I'm the education director at the Botanical Gardens. And we work with about 5,000 youth a year, about 2,500 adults, and we have a lot of fun out there. So if you haven't been to the Botanical Gardens, please come.
And then my name is Christina Salvador. I am originally from Indiana. That's where I was born. My family is from Ecuador, South America. And I also enjoy the outdoors, hiking, camping. My life really changed, though, when I was 22 years old, and I got an internship at a botanical garden in Hawaii, which is a pretty nice job. I learned about horticulture, plant conservation, and endangered species, because if you've ever been to Hawaii, you would know that most of the plant species on Hawaii are endangered. It's just really a great opportunity to work for a botanical garden here in Santa Fe. I love the plants that grow here, the flora, and it's just a really interesting place and a fun place to be.
And our botanical garden is actually new. We're like a baby. So we're 3.5 years old. If you take a look at us, we don't have any of those giant oak trees that you go and see in New York botanical gardens that you can't even reach your arms around. But that means that you're getting to see the birth of a botanical garden, which is a pretty rare thing. So this is our garden on Museum Hill. This was taken a couple of years ago. So even since then, these plants are bigger. Raise your hand if you've been to the botanical garden on Museum Hill.
That's great.
Awesome. That's wonderful. We like to see that. So we just opened a new phase of our garden called Ojos y Manos, and it focuses on the relationship between plants and people in the Southwest. So it looks at fibers, dyes, plants that are used as medicines, plants that are used as food, and plants that are used as tools here in the Southwest over the past 2,000 years.
We also have a second location called the Leonore Curtin Wetland Preserve. It's located in La Cienega. How many people have been there?
Yay!
Yeah, that's a good number. Good for you. It's open May to November. Definitely put it on your list if you haven't been there. It's free. It's got an amazing wetland, migratory birds, dragonflies, amazing trails, enormous cottonwood trees that in October turn gold and are just amazing. We've done a couple art exhibits. It's a really cool and fun place. It's by Las Golondrinas. If you want directions, our website's got lots of information. Okay, so now that we've introduced you to ourselves and where we work, we want to know why you are here. So we're going to try another poll. So you get your phones ready. This time, all you have to do is put the number or put the letter in that applies to you. Okay, so we hope we get some responses here. Why are you here today? Now, if we can get some responses fired off quickly, yeah. That had to have come from a student in the audience. And it's fine if it's other. I would definitely respond with A. I'm really appreciating that people are doing this poll. So, okay, the adults in the audience aren't getting extra credit, so. Okay, awesome. So this is just a quick sample of, we wanted to know why you're here. But let's go ahead and dive into the plants and the stories, because you want to hear about plants from around the world. So let's first go to a far-off area of Indonesia, to the rainforest. This is a plant that maybe you've never seen before. I've never seen it in person. I would love to go to the rainforest and see this. It is the world's largest flower. It weighs up to 15 pounds. It's 3 feet across, and it actually smells, thank you, Molly, it smells like rotting flesh. That's exactly the description. I know, and it doesn't even look super pretty, but I'm assuming that if you got near it, you would be a little sick to your stomach. But why? Why does a plant do something like that? Oh, please.
It uses it to attract insects and things to it so it can basically feed off them?
Yes, that is an incredible answer. It is actually attracting these insects for pollination. So the flies that come, that are attracted to that rotting flesh smell, are catching some pollen on them and then flying to another plant and pollinating it. It's an amazing strategy. And why do plants need these strategies? Why do they need to use things like smell? Oh, please.
To reproduce, basically, and create seeds to make more plants.
Yes, so reproduction is a huge reason why plants need to use other strategies. Also, what?
No, what is it called?
This plant? Common name is called corpse flower, corpse plant, because obviously a corpse is rotting. And then the scientific name is Rafflesia arnoldii. And I can give you that name after we're done. Latin names are a little bit more difficult to roll off your tongue. Okay, but imagine you're a plant and you're sitting in the middle of an environment that is extremely depleted. There's no nutrition, there's no minerals. What can you do to access those things? You're not getting it from the ground, so you need to get it from someplace else. Any guesses?
Well,
Yeah, back there. Oh.
Oh wait, one more other person.
You get it from other species, so like flies and other bugs.
Yeah, so there is a clue on there. Carnivorous plants are attracting and capturing insects and digesting those for the nutrients and minerals that aren't available in their environment. In this case, this plant has these stalks and they have glands, and there's a mucilage that comes out of these glands, and it's very sweet. And these insects are attracted to this plant, and then the plant captures them and eats them. But this is a plant that you have probably seen. I've seen people have it in their house. It's actually, I think it's adorable, but it's ferocious. And those ferocious parts there that resemble a jaw are actually modified leaves. So if you think about it, a plant has to use the parts that it's evolved with, but they have to modify them in some way. So in this case, 2 leaves have developed almost jaw-like structures, and they have tiny hairs inside those leaves. And when an insect goes in there, it's going to trigger that hair, and those 2 leaves are going to snap shut in less than 1 second. Can anybody tell me what fruit this is? Yeah, say it. It's a fruit of the chocolate plant. You said cocoa bean. It's very, very close. So this is the fruit from the chocolate tree. It has 30 to 50 seeds that are covered in that white pulp inside each one of those pods. The tree can grow up to 20 to 30 of these pods over the course of a single year. Now, can anybody take, and this is a very hard thing to just know, but take a guess at how much chocolate that tree is producing in a single year if it has 40 pods with all these seeds? No? Just take a wild guess. I heard a pound, and that's exactly right. So it's not very much chocolate, and you have to think about how many trees it's going to take to create that supply of chocolate. Also, this plant's Latin name is Theobroma cacao, which translates to food of the gods. And it's a very appropriate name because it's very delicious and we all love it. So plant discoveries are also being made every day, and I think this is an amazing area. Research is going on around the world. And just recently, I think this came out in November, the tallest tree in the tropics was discovered. And they found this tree by using a very sophisticated airborne laser technology where they fly over forests, they shoot down laser beams, I think it was 500,000 beams in a single second, and they can actually create 3D diagrams of a forest. They can tell what trees are there, the chemical compositions, and they can make really fascinating discoveries over huge amounts of land really, really quickly. And so it's an incredible area if anybody's interested in engineering, lasers. These are applications that are very valuable in the plant world. Also, new discoveries about plants are going on underneath the ground. So in this study, these researchers found that there were light receptors in the roots. And they couldn't figure out, well, how is a plant getting light down to the roots? It's beneath the soil. They found out that the plant has almost like a fiber optic cable that's channeling down through the stem, and it is passing along that light to the roots. When they knocked out that cable, when they took away the gene that controls that, they found that the roots weren't growing nearly as well. So these are very interesting and fun things, but there's also a lot of issues that are serious and that are worldwide. So here we are. This is a current issue right now with bananas. Now, bananas are very different than apples. Does anyone know what way, like why the bananas are more at risk than, let's say, something that we just talked about? So the bananas that are, what? Go ahead.
No, somebody said no? Okay.
No? Okay. So bananas, well, go ahead. Yeah.
All the bananas that we eat come from a very narrow gene pool. It's only a couple cultivars that we bring.
Right now, we are all consuming a single cultivar. We've been consuming that single cultivar pretty much since the 1960s. However, that really makes it at risk and prone to disease, and that's exactly what's happening. Across the world in major banana production regions, there's a disease that is affecting the plants, and it is killing them. It's very lethal. So in this case, they're going to have to find another cultivar of banana that can replace that cultivar. We're going to have to like it if we're going to buy it. It's going to have to be grown worldwide, and it's a really major undertaking for plants. Also, it's hard to talk about plants without talking about climate change. Plants are grown around the world, and we depend on them. And in this case, this is probably a plant that most of us depend on a daily basis. Coffee plantations are growing in areas like West Africa, where it's becoming more arid, drier. There's not as much water available. And so there is talk about how these regions are going to have to shift, and they're going to have to grow coffee in other areas. And in the areas where they grow them, populations of people who are very impoverished might not have the ability to farm this anymore. So it's really a big issue, and it might actually affect the price of the coffee that we consume. Another plant that's also facing some risk, like the chocolate that we saw in the pods, it does also grow in tropical climates, and it is being affected by climate change. And as we develop new types of agriculture, we're looked at economic issues that are in the news every day. So this is a major one that's international and very local. But when you want to raise a lot of attention for a plant, what a better way you could do it than attaching a celebrity to it. So these scientists actually wanted to get worldwide attention really quickly, so they named their plant after Lady Gaga. And it was an interesting fern found in Costa Rica, and because of that sort of naming a plant to honor somebody, which happens all the time, they're going to probably preserve the conservation of this plant, and there's a lot of like extra recognition that goes into it. So one of the most wild stories that I hear about plants now, though, is sort of about coming from NASA. And what they're saying is, as we want to take larger missions to the moon, possibly go to Mars, what are the astronauts going to depend on if they go that far out? They can't actually come up with ways to do missions to supply them with food, so they're considering agriculture. They're considering growing plants in space. And they are releasing statements such as Mars being food independent by 2048, which is shocking to me. But it is something that is being investigated, and I really do feel like ideas like this about plants could become a reality in the near future.
So this is another one that we're going to be talking about again in a few minutes, but who here has ever heard of GMOs, or genetically modified organisms? You guys, so what is a GMO?
A genetically modified
Organism, okay. And so we're going to be talking about that in just a minute, and there's a lot of controversy about this topic right now out in the news. So some people really are for GMOs, others are against, so we'll be kind of taking a little vote in a minute on that.
Okay. So this is just an everyday street scene. And what I wanted you to stop and think about was, as you came here tonight, or even just recall your entire day, can you think of a single plant that you could name? Something that you saw today, but you knew the name of it. What tree, or what plant, sorry?
Yeah, an invasive Siberian elm.
Yep.
It's everywhere, and I mean, if you know how invasive it is, it probably makes you angry when you see it growing everywhere. That's a really good example. Anyone else?
Pinus ponderosa.
The Latin name, the ponderosa pine. That's an excellent example. It's one of our super large trees, and I notice it a lot too. I think it's a beautiful conifer. Well, unfortunately, day-to-day living, most of our society suffer from what we are going to introduce tonight, and it's commonly known as plant blindness. And what that is it's this belief or concept that people don't really see plants. They don't really notice them. And they're just not that meaningful because they can't really see them in the background. They blend in. They're all green. They don't move. They're not exciting. They're not going to eat me. They're not like animals. And so when you don't notice something like plants in your everyday environment, you tend to care about it less. And that's something that we really want to like combat. Like we want to get over plant blindness. We want you to like recognize plants in your daily life or around you, and then hopefully you'll have a meaningful connection to them and you'll realize the importance that they have in our life and in the existence of our species.
Okay, so here's our next poll. Now, everybody knows that we are not plant blind to this plant. Green chili, right? Red chili. So really quickly, we'd like everybody to choose which is your favorite. So this is another one of our polls. It's a live poll.
That's not fair.
We're going to publish this tomorrow on Twitter. No, this is great. I just want to say thank you because this is data and numbers, and it's actually, as a scientist, really, it's gratifying to see
Data
graphs being generated.
So it looks like we've got close here between Christmas and red, with Christmas pulling out slightly ahead.
Shocking.
It's good that this is anonymous because we don't want to shame the people that say, why would I eat chili? Okay, so what we have here is a plant that is clearly incredibly important here in New Mexico. This is a cash crop, and it's something that here we have a plant that we eat all the time. I know that I can eat green chili or Christmas 3 times a day, easily. Sometimes a little on a snack, too. But did you all know that there are a bunch of different types of peppers that are all actually the same genus species? So all of these different peppers, everything from our very boring bell pepper all the way up through the ghost peppers and some of the habaneros, those are actually all the same species, which means they all have the same genetic ancestor. Chilies actually emerged about 6,500 years ago from kind of central Mexico, and actually Molly Toll is the person I learned this from, who's out there in the audience. So if I get anything wrong, Molly, just raise your hand and let me know. And then was traded all through the Southwest, down into South America, and then eventually, when the Europeans got there, was brought all around the world. So this is a plant that, although it's the same species, it's had different traits that have been selected for. So these are cultivars, just like our apples, that a bell pepper and a ghost chili, do those have the same characteristics? No, right? So what is a ghost pepper? Have you guys ever heard of one of those?
I've had one.
You've had one? What is it like?
I thought I was gonna die.
You thought you were going to die? What about in the back? You said you've tried, have you had one too? But they're supposed to be, yeah, they're hot, super, super
We
hot.
watch YouTube videos of people eating them.
Yeah, we almost brought a
yesterday.
YouTube video of somebody turning like bright like going bright red and then turning white and almost passing out after eating one. So this is part of our history, and we can look both at our history here in the Southwest, and we can also look at world trade routes through chilies. So thinking both about these plants on their own, but also their relationship to people, and the fact that a bell pepper would not have developed on its own. It only develops because people are breeding it for the specific set of characteristics. Now the story of our green pepper. Has anybody ever heard of the story of green chili and where it came from originally? So there's a lot of different kinds of green chili, but the one that's probably cultivated here the most is called, does anyone know? Big Hatch? And they primarily grow something called Big Jim, which is a great hefty pepper. It's primarily the ones that we get when we buy them in the grocery store, or you buy that 50-pound sack of them and roast them. Those are almost always Big Jims. And it was developed by this gentleman here. This is his picture when he graduated from high school. And this is sort of middle age and a little past middle age. And this is a big barrel of Big Jims there. So he was born in 1923, and both of his parents were Japanese. And if you think about 1923, when he turns 20, it's 1943. And what's happening in the world? World War II. He enlists and goes and fights in Europe. He is imprisoned in a POW camp, a prisoner of war camp. He's 86 pounds when he gets out of that camp. He comes back to the United States. He comes back to New Mexico, which is where he was growing up. He was from Las Cruces. When he enlisted in the war, he'd gone through 2 years of college. He gets back, and they tell him, "We don't want you, you're Japanese." So his professors who knew him, what's that? That's crazy, right? Yeah. So his professors hear this, and they say, "No, this is one of our bright stars." So his professors lobbied to have him readmitted. He was readmitted to NMSU and completed his degree. He studied horticulture, and he went on to become a professor down there. And he was the one who invented the Big Jim pepper. So this is one of those things where we're thinking once again about the story of history, who we see ourselves as New Mexicans, and the fact that we have people from around the world who are contributing to that story. Okay, so clones. Who here is scared of clones? A little bit. Okay, so the Clone Wars. Although we don't have Star Wars Clone Wars happening here, we do have other clones that are around us all the time. And you might not recognize them as clones, but they are. This right here is a grape called Thompson's seedless grape. This grape is the grape, who here has ever eaten a raisin? Excellent. You have eaten Thompson seedless because 95% of the raisins that we have here come from this variety. Almost all of the different grapes are hybrids of this seedless grape. So one of the things we need to think about is if it's seedless, how do you make more of them? Anybody have an idea of how you would make more of something that's seedless? Cuttings, exactly. So these are clones. You basically have that original vine, you cut a piece off of it, and there's two ways that you can clone something. One is you can graft it onto a root that's already in the ground. So you cut the existing stem, and you put in these little shoots, and they match up so that they can get nutrition and stuff from that root system that's going down into the ground. Or the really simple way, you shove it in some water. And grapes are amazing. They will grow roots. And so this Thompson's grape was originally discovered in Turkey several hundred years ago. It was bought by a gentleman. Anybody have a guess about what his last name was? Excellent. Was brought to California. Smith, no, that's wrong. I won't usually say a guess is wrong, but that one was. In 1878. And has become one of the most popular varieties of grapes that's been grown ever since. But what are grapes, what are they good for? So grapes are used for a lot more than just grapes. Like I said, we make raisins with them. We have grape juice, we have wine, We eat them just the way they are. And it's actually one of our most common types of food coloring for reds and purples and pinks is grape, comes from the grape. So now we're thinking about hybrids versus GMOs. So we had people define what a GMO was. Will you guys say it once more?
Genetically modified organism.
Genetically modified organism. And a hybrid we talked about a little bit earlier, where you take two different species. So right here we have a horse and a donkey, and you can breed them together to create a mule. You can do the same thing with plants. You can take a grapefruit and a tangerine, and they make a tangelo. So a lot of the citrus fruits that we have are different hybrids of different types of these original plants. But that's different than a GMO. So this is an actual picture of a glow-in-the-dark cat. Now, they're not doing it just to make the cat glow in the dark. This is actually a cat that has a very specific gene that they're trying to eliminate feline HIV or feline AIDS from the population. So what they've done is they've taken this jellyfish gene that's glow in the dark, and they've put it on the same gene as this sort of anti-AIDS gene that doesn't allow cats to get AIDS. And this is a really easy way of telling whether or not your cat has that gene and how effective it is. So this kind of genetic modification is happening a lot, and it's a helpful way of people that are trying to do things like cure cancer and AIDS and other diseases, but it's also something they're using with plants. So just really quickly, the difference here between a hybrid. So we have here the two parents that are two different species, and we cross them and we get some new baby that has different traits than the parents. And that's different than, here's our GMO. So this is actually taking a gene from a different species and splicing it in to the genetics of the original species and then coming out with something that's different. And this could be selecting for a lot of different characteristics. And we're not going to weigh in today on whether GMOs are good or bad. That is for you all to decide on your own. And sometimes things don't have a moral value. But there's a lot of reasons that people are using GMOs. So one of the things that they're doing is making things so that they're insect or disease resistant. Like Christina was talking about, we're about to lose a lot of our banana population. What if we could splice a gene in that made those bananas resistant to that fungus? There's also environmental reasons. Yeah?
It's important to point out that actually what's happening in the pesticide spraying is declined. What has to happen is we're actually using worse pesticides now. So the figures get,
So we're not going to weigh in on, so I'll have some on both ends, because I know this brings up strong feelings, and that's part of the reason we're bringing this up today, is it's something that people are talking about in the news. There's environmental and health and agricultural reasons. GMOs can improve crop productivity by up to 40%. It can make plants so that they don't freeze. You can introduce antifreezes into the plants. How do you feel about eating antifreezes in your plants? And there are some questions, though, too, like whether or not you have the right to know that you're eating things that are GMO. Whether or not you have choices that you can make of things that aren't GMO, so that if you choose to eat those things, that you can do so. And then a lot of the plants that we see on our shelves are primarily GMO plants. So everything from canola, corn, cotton, soy, papaya is over 99% of papayas are GMO. And that allows them to survive. There's often a reason that something is made as a GMO plant. So this is just kind of us getting you to start thinking about it, think about the pros and cons, and do some research, get a little bit curious. So are you pro-GMO, no GMO, or are you sort of in the middle ground where you're still thinking about it? Another way that plants are used is as medicine. So this one we threw in at the last second, so we didn't have time to make it a live poll. So we're going to do a old school type of poll, an analog poll, with our hands. So we have here, how many of our medicines do you think are synthesized from plants? 4%, 10%, 40%, or 92%? So who says 4%? Who says 10%? Who says 40%? Who says 92%? The answer is 40%. Yeah, 40% of our of our plants, of our medicines actually were derived from plants, either using extracts or synthesizing plant material. And one of these makes a cardiac medicine, foxglove or digitalis. And this is used to make something that helps people that have severe heart disease survive. Another is an anti-malarial called quinine, and we'll go through this in just a second. And this is one that if you go to a lot of places in the world that have malaria, you can you'll take this. Another one that we're growing in the garden right now is called yerba mansa, and this is one that's used. It's used as an herbal supplement, a tea called lizard's tail tea. Sometimes, if you ever see lizard's tail tea, it is not actually made out of lizard's tails, and even as a poultice, so it can do healing on the skin. So you probably didn't think we were going to talk about spies tonight, but here's, okay, so maybe James Bond was not involved in plant spies, but there are a couple of really important plants that were stolen. And this was actually something that the British did quite a lot in the 1800s. They would send these explorers and spies into these regions that had a monopoly on a plant. So quinine, Peru had a monopoly on quinine. They didn't let any of the seeds or shoots out of Peru. And so they basically controlled the quinine market. So they sent a gentleman named Markham, who was an explorer and a botanist. He went down there and he smuggled out quinine seeds and shoots, and he started a whole quinine factory for the British Empire, which, if you're thinking about what the British were doing at that period, they really needed anti-malarials because that was a major challenge to their explorers and colonists. Anyone recognize what this is? Tea. Tea was another one. China had a monopoly on tea, and British money was flowing into China. Think about, what do you picture the Queen drinking? Tea, right? So it's really central to who the British thought of themselves as being. They had all this money flowing into China. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to be able to grow their own tea. So they actually sent, this is the best name of an explorer ever, Robert Fortune, who was a spy for the British, and they sent him out into the Chinese countryside. He evidently dressed up, and this is his, I don't know how he portrayed himself with those mutton chops, but he went out into China, he stole tea, the seeds, and then he took that back, and the tea that we get from India was from those original seeds that were stolen from China.
I think I'm going to actually cut out this part. So this is actually available. You can view it in the Botanical Garden. It's just a little bit of information about the changing of the zones due to climate change. So plants that currently exist in these zones, over time, the zones are shifting northward because the temperatures are projected to go up. This is a map showing the different, wherever it's gray, there's no change. Wherever there's color, there is change. If you look in New Mexico, there's quite a bit of zone change, meaning that where we sit right now is currently zone 6, and according to these projections, will be very clearly in zone 7, close to zone 8, meaning a lot warmer. So that can really impact something. Our botanical garden, we think about this. We try to select plants that possibly are going to be adapted for that warmer future. This plant right here is called Yucca rostrata. It grows naturally in southern New Mexico, Arizona. Very rarely is seen in the natural environment outside of our garden up here in Santa Fe. But we think that possibly, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, this is a plant that you probably will see in a lot more garden centers and more available to commercial nurseries, and you'll be encouraged to plant it because it's going to require less water and it's going to be more adapted. So our landscape could end up looking like this with a lot more yuccas. A lot more like...
So we're thinking also about protecting plants and seeds for the future. So one of the really cool things that's going on right now is up in Svalbard, which is an island that's about 180 miles from the North Pole. It's very, very far north. They have created this underground bunker for storing seeds, so that even in the case of a nuclear holocaust, that there's going to be a seed bank that's still available. This is something that they have right now, about 300 different species and about 2,000 cultivars. But if you think about that compared to the 400,000 plant species that are on Earth, it's a tiny, tiny, tiny number. So think about how you can store seeds, how you can dry them, how you can save them. This is something anybody that's growing plants can do. You can go out, you can collect those seeds, dry them, and store them in containers like this for the next year. You don't have to go out and buy seeds every year.
But we run into one major problem with coconuts that are actually threatened in the Caribbean right now due to another disease that's affecting them. What I'm talking about was basically storing seeds in a dry condition that will preserve them over time, or freezing them. However, if you did that with coconuts, they wouldn't make it. It's not a viable way to store them. So there's really no easy solution with coconuts right now. Okay, so in the future, you now really want to work with plants and have as much fun as Molly and I do, because you find them so amazing and fascinating. So we wanted to just show you a couple of examples of sort of the jobs that are available and the things that you could do.
Yeah, so in addition to working with education in plants like I do, or like Christina, she works with our collection of plants. So we basically have a catalog of all the plants that are in the garden, and Christina knows where every plant is. She has a number that attaches to each plant, and she knows when a plant dies and when it comes into the garden. So that's another kind of job that you could have. But there's also things like greenhouse production. Think about all the plants you eat. All the lettuces, tomatoes, all those things. Somebody needs to grow that. And there's experts that actually are in those greenhouses making sure we have food in the grocery stores.
So I pulled these jobs directly off of horticulture.com. It's a great job database. Most of these jobs are just with a 4-year degree in horticulture, but any of the sciences, engineering, all of that's really relevant to plant science. Obviously, if you keep going and you get your PhD, you could be a research scientist in a lab, and those jobs do come with a significantly higher pay grade. So just something to consider. There is a future in working with plants. So now we just want to make a plug for our latest program at the Botanical Garden. This is a total aside, but if you come to this garden, we're going to be open at night. We've got a cool night lights program. It's really fun. We've got entertainment. Go to our website. You'll see that there's lots of really cool bands, drinks, lasers. We think it's a really fun thing to do. So, and 12 and under is free. So bring your children, bring your younger brothers and sisters, have a blast. Just like disco cats.
Yeah,
We think it's this much fun.
We don't want to falsely represent it. There will not actually be disco cats. I'm sorry.
Molly!
Well, you can bring your disco cat. Well, you actually joke about that. Somebody
depends.
did bring their cat. We don't encourage it.
Please don't bring your cat.
Please don't bring your cat.
Bring your camera and post it to social media. Stick it on Facebook. Right now we did an Insta meet with a bunch, like over 100 Instagrammers were in the garden last week. So if you are active in social media, we highly encourage you to come and have a lot of fun. So thank you again. Oh, and we will take questions. Yeah, what's the...